Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Mighty Oak Show. So glad once again to have you with us and looking forward to our conversation today, focused on an issue that is very important, particularly at this moment in our country's history. We'll get into that in just a second, but before we do, again, if you have not yet subscribed to the Mighty Oaks YouTube channel, you need to do that. Go on YouTube. You can look for the Mighty Oaks Foundation or the Mighty Oaks Show, and you'll find us there. And would love to have you join us there. If you're watching this, obviously you're there. Subscribe, hit the notification bell. That lets you know when more content comes online. If you're listening somewhere else, if you're listening to the podcast or listening over at Mojo 50, again, thank you for listening. Take some time, go over to YouTube, subscribe there, and you'll be able to follow along. Tons of content. We're constantly putting things up, and would love to invite you to join us there. Today, we are going to talk specifically about one of the programs of the Mighty Oaks Foundation, our First Responders program, and I want to talk about that. And again, this is a critical time to talk about the world of first responders, and more specifically, the world of police officers, those who are dealing with so much of the turmoil and upheaval in our world. A few weeks ago on the Mighty Oaks Show, we had a couple of guests from our local police and fire department here in Murrieta, California, and they spoke to some of these issues. But next week, we are hosting another first responders program, and I wanted to bring on Kevin Schroeder. Kevin has been on our show before. You're probably familiar with him and his testimony. If not, I'll have him share a little bit of that here in just a second. But Kevin, amongst all the other things that he does, he really leads our first responder sessions. And so wanted to talk about that, why we do it, why it's important, what so many of those first responders are dealing with in their professional lives, in their personal lives, and even a little bit of why we as a veterans organization decided to get into to helping those in the first responders community. So Kevin, again, thanks for taking the time to jump on with us and talk through some of these things. Always great to have you on. Let's start with your background. So before we talk about why we serve first responders and why you're involved in all of this, talk about maybe your military background and your law enforcement background and what you do now with Mighty Oaks.
Okay. Well, I graduated high school when I was 17, and then about 2 weeks after I graduated high school, I joined the Marine Corps, went to boot camp. Was married a short time after I enlisted, and spent 4 years in the Marine Corps. Got out and just kind of tinkered around for a couple years. I know when I left my last duty station, Camp Pendleton, we had some Highway Patrol recruiters for the California Highway Patrol that came on base, and I was really intrigued by that, but we didn't necessarily want to stay in California, didn't have any family there. So came back to Texas, but I really felt like a seed was planted there. It was, a lot of veterans are in the police field, what I was looking for, and so I started doing some applying and stuff, and then I was a police officer for 21 years and retired about 2.5 years ago. And for Mighty Oaks, I do the program managing for the sessions in Texas, Ohio, and the 2 first responder programs that we have in California. And when I'm not at a session, I am the training manager, which I help kind of disciple the team leaders that we have in place, and also train up one's potential candidates that want to be team leaders.
That's awesome. And your hobby is growing a beard, clearly. Definitely. So that's your main hobby.
Right.
Oh man. So you have worked with in the first responder community for a long time. What are some of the maybe unique issues? You can speak even to what's going on right now, but some of the things that people don't understand that police officers, even firefighters, so many folks in the law enforcement and first responder community, the unique challenges that they deal with, and some of the challenges that would bring them to a place like a Mighty Oaks program.
Okay, well, when you're in the police academy, you're learning a lot about law, and you see a lot of photos and different things that you could potentially encounter, whether it's like a major accident scene or a major crime scene or whatever. But those really don't put feelings until you go to a place like that.
Yeah.
So, you could be working in a law enforcement field, and for a month or two, it just seems like it's like typical things that you're doing, traffic stops that really don't amount to anything, answering alarm calls, reports for theft, and then all of a sudden, the next day or the next moment, you could be in a near-death experience, whether that's with a firearm or an accident or um, just a wide variety of dangers out there. And a lot of the guys and gals who feel like maybe they were prepared for it, not necessarily as prepared as they thought. And, that stuff can get stuffed down for a while and
Yeah.
doesn't really get addressed.
We made the decision, was it 3 years ago, to start a dedicated first responders program? I think it's 3 years ago.
Yes.
And it's kind of an interesting process for us. We are a veterans organization. We serve the veteran community. Started serving more and more of the active duty military community and families, so spouses, and we've done that for a number of years. Had a first responder, someone we know, come to us really through some friends and say, he wasn't in the military, he's been at these various places, he's dealing with a lot of things, he needs the kind of help that you can offer, can he come to one of the programs? And that was a test for us. Didn't exactly know how he was a firefighter, how that would work in our culture, as serving veterans, and how that would work. And it worked great. So we started inviting more and more police officers and firefighters to come to our programs. We integrated them in. And there's an interesting brotherhood or sisterhood, as the case may be, from those in the first responder community and those coming from the military community. There seems to be a common bond there. So it's worked well. But a couple of years ago, we decided as a team we needed to focus more on just those in the first responder community, because as much as there are similarities, there are some differences. And this is something that I don't fully understand, and I've observed, and I've talked to a lot of police and firefighters. But what makes it different for a police officer? What makes it different for a firefighter than perhaps a combat veteran, someone coming back, from war? And a lot of the folks we deal with have had multiple combat deployments, right? I mean, they've been to Iraq or Afghanistan 5, 6, 7 times. But there's still something different about someone who's served in combat and someone who's out on the street, someone who is serving as a police officer or a firefighter generally. What are some of the things that make that not better or worse, not more or less challenging, but different?
Well, I know, like if you get deployed, there's a pretty big expectation that you're going to be in combat, especially if it's in, a country that we're at war with. So there's some expectations that is a high possibility. Whereas in law enforcement, you just, like I said, you can go through seasons to where it just seems like being a police officer is boring, or being a fireman is boring. It gets pretty routine, even though we don't like to use that word, because that if you get in that routine mindset, for instance, they always tell you if you go to an alarm at a house at night, you never pull up directly in front of the house. You turn your lights off, down the block, and you want that element of surprise. But if someone has been working days for a couple of years and they know it was just probably the lawnmower guy or, the guy hanging the door flyer on there, and then they go to nights and then they forget, and you pull up to a house and next thing you know, they're fighting for their life. So you kind of get that more routine mentality, I believe, which, I imagine in the veteran community you can as well, unless you're deployed a lot. But as far as in the first responder field, like I said, there's a lot of this just mundane, monotonous type of stuff. And then next thing you know, man, you're in a situation that you never thought would happen in your career.
Yeah. It seems to me to, I've been on one side of that, but not in the law enforcement side. When you're serving in combat, that happens at a place in time, and then you come home from that. And so there's not only time, but there's distance. There's a lot of things that separate you from the event that caused the trauma or the difficulties in your life. So you have some space to deal with that. What's interesting, and we see this in our program, probably half, I think we say, of those who come to one of our programs are active duty. The other half would be veterans. I don't know if that's exactly right, but So a lot of folks have been out for a long time. They served a while ago. They were in combat years ago, some of them. But on the first responder side, on our first responders program, most of those folks are still working. And so I think one of the major differences is, at least from the outside looking in, they just don't have the opportunity to take time to really process what they're dealing with. And that creates some real problems personally and then even relationally.
Yeah, I think that's probably the number one issue you just described. That's a very good analogy, that there's not much time to decompress.
So when they come to a program, like ours, what do we do to help them process through that? What do we tell them not only to do to get past whatever they're carrying or to deal with whatever they've stuffed down in their pack, but going forward, how do we help them manage, when they go back to work and when they start to deal with these other things again for a career? How do we help them work through that? I don't mean we as Mighty Oaks either. I mean just,
right.
What tools can they have to work through that?
Right. Well, it's just it's interesting because recently we had he was I believe he's some type of senior management with the fire department that came through our veteran program in Texas and one of the June programs that we had this year. And it was interesting, like during his testimony, he was thinking before he came out, he was like, I'm not going to go up there and cry or, I'm not going to break down or anything like that. And he's like, man, I came up there and, he's like, I had no idea that I was going to share what I shared,
Right.
So I think being in a program helps mine those things out, and, going forward, it helps you to not get in that situation where we're told, man, I can really stuff and suppress these feelings. Whereas when, we like to talk about implementing the 4 B's, be in prayer, be in the word, be in fellowship, and be in touch with your corner man. Those are kind of like foreign concepts because we feel like we're just kind of this island on our own. And when they go out and actually implement those, for instance, we have an outpost here in League City where I live, where we have veterans and first responders. And it's interesting to see like active duty police officers that are helping guys who are veterans that may have an addiction or whatever, and it's just an opportunity for them to say, hey, we're men. We're just men here,
Right.
and we're trying to walk the path that God wants us to. So, just really, some of the tools moving forward is definitely that fellowship and that brotherhood to where you can have a corner man and you don't have to suppress it. You don't have to hold that in, because one of the biggest things they learn at a session is, man, what's beating my chest is beating the guy that's sitting next to me.
Yeah.
So when their eyes are open to that and they can go back home and implement that stuff, it really helps. I have a friend, he went through the program a couple of years ago. He works for the agency currently that I retired from. And, he had an encounter on a traffic stop where a guy came out with a vest and a rifle, and, he took some rounds and stuff, and they ended up shooting the guy who survived. But we got to talking about that later. He's like, man, that the program, having been through a program and going through something like this, really prepared me mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. We talk about resilience, and, he basically was saying, I know that I'm going to face tough things, but I don't have to face those alone. I mean, ultimately I have God that I can lean on every day, but also these people that he's put in my life that I can lock arms with and vent about that and talk. So I know that was a long answer. I hope I answered it.
No, that's good. I think, it's one thing to say, from where you are now, let's deal with what's behind you. And again, if you're a veteran and you served several years ago, I can deal with what's behind me, then I can now focus on my relationships and moving forward in a healthy way. But if I'm I'm a police officer, I'm at the program next week, I'm dealing with what's behind me, and then Saturday morning or Sunday morning or Monday, I'm going back to work, I need to be able to move forward. And I think just having that connection is a big part of that. It's a huge part of that.
For sure.
I don't know how to ask this question, but what impact does the community's attitude toward law enforcement have on those who are serving? I've talked to federal law enforcement agents who are in Portland. I've talked to police officers who have dealt with some of the protests that have gone on across the country. And there is a real impact on what's happening in our country to many of those men and women who are serving. Can you talk to that a little bit? I think sometimes we think that they're kind of nameless, faceless people. who are doing their job and it doesn't impact them. And yet I think it has a dramatic impact on them.
Yeah, it does. This is kind of a funny story, but it just kind of gives, especially as a police officer, just kind of cynicism that they can develop. And my daughter, she's going to college, and I think it was last year, they had to do a presentation on something government related. So one of her classmates, he was a young Hispanic kid. He wanted to be a police officer, and he said, on my way to school to do this speech, I got pulled over, and I told the police officer, I was like, yeah, I want to be a police officer. I'm going to go talk about wanting to be a police officer. And do you have any advice for me? And he says, yes, don't be a police officer, be a fireman, because people like firemen better. So, but, I mean, he was speaking from his heart, like, there's a lot of people sometimes, and it's seasonal, especially when we go through times like we're going through now. It doesn't seem like police officers have a lot of people in their corner. So it definitely decreases morale.
Yeah.
Especially when, the majority of the police officers, and I can say this, over a 21-year career, I've genuinely worked with people that just wanted to go out and help people, no matter what their color was or their background or their faith. They just want to help people. And, when we get some negative publicity and things kind of get blown out of proportion, it can definitely lower morale.
Right. What role does faith, and this is probably a longer conversation for us, what role does faith have in helping people move forward from something in their past, whether it's dealing with that or just taking the steps to move forward positively? Because again, I think we can look at police officers and say, faith doesn't figure in here anywhere, they're just doing their job. How important is faith, and how does that work its way into the everyday life of someone, out on the street doing the work of a police officer?
Well, if I had to narrow it down, one word, it would be hope. The same police officer I was telling you about that still works in the community that I retired from, I texted him. I said, hey, man, we got a first responder session that's coming up. Do you have any guys in mind that could use the program? And there's two guys. League City sits in Galveston County, which is a large county. So there's a couple guys with the sheriff's department that are signed up and ready to go. And, so one, you're giving hope to other guys, knowing that, man, we work in this profession and we don't have to feel, beaten down all the time. There's hope. God has a plan for us. Faith definitely comes into play in situations because you're dealing with a lot of people that don't seem to have any hope, whether they lost a loved one through suicide, through an accident, through a murder, whatever. We can share that there's hope, and not just with the community, but with your fellow coworkers, the men and women that you work with. That God has a plan, and He has a purpose, and He has us out here. I mean, it's in the Bible. I think about Romans 13, where it talks about that God has, law, government in place as instruments of righteousness. And so God has a purpose and a plan. And puts us in certain situations at certain times for a reason, and that brings a lot of hope.
Yeah. How do we, I know the process, but someone who shows up to a program like this because they are hopeless, they need something. In many cases now, and the more we do this, the more this happens. A police chief or a fire chief says, you need to go to that program, or I'm going to make it possible for you to go to that program. Guy shows up and he doesn't want to have anything to do with God, doesn't care about God. Maybe he's angry at God because of something he's seen or experienced. How do you walk someone through the process of going from there? I don't care about God. I have nothing, I've had negative experiences with people that believe in God, or God has left me, whatever the case. How do you walk someone from there on day one through an understanding of the importance of having a relationship with their Creator?
Well, I believe the process, we say it a lot at Mighty Oaks, is trust the process. There's a lot of skepticism, especially if you've been in ministry for a while, and then you come into something like Mighty Oaks and be like, wow, can you really make that big of an impact in a week? And once you the first thing that I think of is the transparency that we have at a program, especially when it comes to first responders, because they really have a nose for that.
Yeah.
Because they're always being lied to and they're not used to people just being raw and open. So when you have that kind of atmosphere, it really lowers the barriers and the guard puts them down. And not just that, we tell people, when I do the welcome at the sessions that I'm at, I say, we're a faith-based program. It means that we believe that God created us and that we have hope through Jesus Christ. And we'll unpack what that looks like through the week. But what it also means is that if you're an atheist, you're welcome here. If you're an agnostic, you're welcome here. If you don't know exactly where you stand with faith, you're welcome here. We just want to share with you the hope that we've encountered, how we've encountered it, and see if if what you're doing isn't working. We believe that this is something that can work for you, and we're not going to put anything in your hands and make you do anything. We're just going to try to share, be as raw and transparent as we can, and share how it has worked in our lives.
Yeah.
And it is amazing at the end of the week, when you see guys that came like that were totally turned off from God, and then they're making professions of faith and stuff at the end of the week.
Yeah. Yeah, it's awesome to see that transformation take place. And I think part of it is because we don't just talk about faith in a general sense. I had this discussion with Matt Statler, who we had on the show last week, Matt, and talking about kind of the specific aspect of faith. And this is really important to understand. When we talk about faith and talk about faith in your life and talk about what faith means, it's not a faith in something that's out there, something that is untouchable or unknowable. It's faith in God, but there is a path to God. There is a path to having that relationship with Him, and that's through Jesus Christ, and we understand that as Christians. Can you talk about how important a specific understanding of faith is? It's not general, it's not broad, it's not hopefully you can believe in something. But we're going to show you the path of faith. We're going to show you what you should believe in. How important is that for someone that is the skeptic that's really trying to figure things out?
Yeah, it's very important because there's a lot of people that just kind of walk in the gray. It's kind of like it's like a smoky road they're going down. They really can't see it clearly because of the fog. Like they understand there's a faith, but how is that practical? How is that applicable? And I just narrow it down to just that relationship. I say this verse, I think every time I'm on here, I say it at every session. It's really just a verse that I'm passionate about because I really came to grips with it at a point in my life where things were not looking too good. And it's Philippians 3:8, where Paul says, I consider everything loss in comparison to the surpassing worth of knowing Christ. And, I look at some important things in my life. Right now, grandkids are the big thing, right? Because, I wanted to give my kids away at one point, but you never have that feeling about grandkids, at least I haven't yet. And I adore them. I think about my relationship with my wife. We're going to celebrate 30 years of marriage this December. And just that relationship that we have, that's still a work in progress. And that's valuable to me. But to come to grips that none of that would have been possible without Christ and the fact that I could know Him.
Yeah.
I just did a final challenge in our last Ohio on Ezekiel 37:38, where it talks about the valley of dry bones. And it uses that same type of verbiage, that you may know that there is a Lord. So, just the fact that we can have this firm foundation, that it's that is something that you can that you feel and that and it's just spelling that out, and the how personal it gets when we know that we have a God that loves us, and He demonstrated that love when He sent Jesus to die on a cross for us who are sinners, and the fact that He conquered sin and death. And especially in the context of what we're talking about, being first responders, we see a lot of people that make mistakes. We make mistakes, and to know that, that there's hope in that, and that there's one person that didn't make a mistake, and that's Jesus, and He has a purpose and plan for us. Man, it's awesome.
Along with that is the issue of identity. I think you and I have talked about this before, but it bears being repeated. In the veteran community, for sure, people transitioning out of the military, men and women transitioning out of the military, so much of what they struggle with is just a loss of identity. They knew who they were when they were in uniform. They lost that outside of that. On the first responder side, I think that certainly happens when the transition happens to retirement or whatever. But I have observed that so much of the struggle between the police officer or the firefighter and their spouse or their children or other people in their community or in their church is really an identity issue. It's an identity struggle. They know who they are when they're responding to a fire or they're dealing with what they deal with as police officers, but they don't know who they are outside of that. How do you address the identity issue for those who are wearing a uniform and doing the job every day?
Right. That's a good question. Especially if you're struggling with faith issues, when you nail that down and you know that God has a purpose and a plan for you. I would use, whether I was inside the office or in the car, I would use those for opportunities to share that hope. When I was on patrol, I would keep, I knew that God had me here for a reason. I have this message of hope. And in the context of being a police officer, how does that apply? I used to keep a sticker on my cage in the back. It would say the Romans road, have an arrow pointing up. It would have the verses that would talk about how we're all have fallen short, but God has sent his son for us. And those would spark conversations, or even just playing Christian music in a patrol car. I'd end up praying with somebody that was taken to jail, and that right there showed me that, wow, man, this profession as a police officer is, God wants to use this as a platform, and just to be the man that he created me to be a police officer. At one point I used to think in my career, I was like, there's no way I could be a Christian police officer. And I found that to be different when I started to grow in my walk with Christ. I was like, wow, even now I'm outside of the law enforcement community for the most part. I communicate with some of the guys, and we've had, since I retired, we've had more people go through Mighty Oak session than when I was actually there.
Yeah, wow.
It just goes to show that there's opportunity there, to know that, it's great to be a police officer. It may look like this is my identity, but as a man of God, my identity is, it's applicable to any profession. That we can be the men or women that God created us to be in this profession.
I think one of the things that helps, with that, and even leading through a program like ours, and there are other programs, we're talking about Mighty Oaks, but there are other programs and opportunities. But one of the things we've been very intentional about has been having men and women lead sessions, lead classes, lead breakouts who have a shared experience with the students that are there. I think this is certainly one concern that a lot of folks have before they come, is who's going to be teaching, who's going to be talking, why should I listen to them, what will I possibly have in common with them? And then they find out it's a Christian program or a faith-based program. Like, I have nothing in common with them. When we are running our normal programs, it's veterans, some active duty service members, all of our team leaders, our combat veterans. That's who's teaching. That's who's leading. That's who's kind of showing the way forward. And then on the first responder side, it's no different. Can you talk about some of the folks who lead teams, who teach classes, some of the experience that they have, and why we would put them in front of men and women who are struggling in their own professional lives?
Right. I was talking to a guy that's actually in the Army still right now. He's a career soldier. I think he's a senior enlisted guy. And he was telling me when he came through one of our programs, he was like, prior to coming here, me and my wife went to a Christian organization that had a marriage retreat. And he said, man, those guys were really good and everything. And I learned some great stuff. But having come to a program where I have other veterans who are speaking that same kind of hope, I was able to relate better.
Right.
And so, when we have the veteran programs and the first responder programs, when you see that those are the guys that are leading, and, like this program that we're going to have in California next week, we have firemen, EMS, and police that's going to be on the team leader cadre.
Yeah.
That'll be able to speak into the guys that are going to participate who work in one of those three professions. And when you have somebody who has walked in your shoes a little bit maybe and knows the experience of what that's like, it definitely opens up a door that would be harder to open elsewhere. Yeah,
that's awesome. If you were talking to somebody that was on the fence about attending a program, what would you say to kind of nudge them over? This is why you must go.
Yeah, I tell guys, I say, look, the only thing it's going to cost you is your time. And it is a week, and it is well worth. I can't put words to what happens at an actual session, but if you're at a point where you've tried just about everything, you need to let this be your one last ditch effort. to give it a shot.
Yeah.
And, that helps.
All it will cost you is your time. In fact, we pay for travel and everything associated with the program. So there is no investment other than the time investment.
Right.
Yeah.
And when guys find that out at a session, I mean, we had a session recently in Texas, and the first responder came through, and he was also a veteran, but he lived in New Mexico. I forget his name, but man, when he found that out, that everything is paid for, he donated some money to Mr. Blaylock to be able to pay for steak dinners on a Friday night.
Wow.
So it becomes contagious. It's really neat to see some of these guys give back.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Kevin, I appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you next week. I'm going to do my best to get to the program. But for those watching and listening, be in prayer for these guys. This is a men's session, so pray for these men. Pray that they'll get there. It was a crazy time even to travel. It's been nuts because we pay for travel, which means we buy plane tickets, and then we've had a hard time getting people on planes. But pray they'll be there. Pray that God will be able to work in their lives, and pray for Kevin and the team there that they'll be able to minister to these folks. So, Kevin, really appreciate it. Thank you for doing it. We'll do it again.
All right, sounds good.
All right. For those of you that are watching, thank you again for watching. And one more time, go ahead and subscribe, hit the notification bell. And if you would like to participate in a program or you know someone who should, go to our webpage, mightyoaksprograms.org, mightyoaksprograms.org. There you'll find out everything about Mighty Oaks. You'll also find a place to apply. So if you know someone who needs to apply or you're that someone, go ahead and do that. That comes to our team. Our team will then process that. And as we were just mentioning, no cost to you. It'll take a few days of your time, Monday through Friday, but that's it. That's your investment. And it really could change the trajectory of your life going forward. At the very least, give you a different perspective and help you to see things perhaps a little more clearly, put you in a community of people that get it and that you can talk to. So take some time to do that. If, on the other hand, you don't know anyone, but you want to support an organization like ours, the reason we're able to run programs and cover travel and all the other expenses associated with that are because we have great donors who jump on our website and give there. And we would love to partner with you in that way as well. So again, thank you, and we'll talk to you next time. This show, for those of you that do watch or listen regularly, you know that most of the time we talk about overcoming trials in life and overcoming difficulties in life and dealing with traumas and dealing with obstacles and dealing with all of the things that we all have to deal with in life. And we share great stories and testimonials, and we're always thankful for the opportunity to do that. Once in a while, though, we take kind of a different turn, and it's good to get different perspectives on so many of the issues going on in the world and in our lives. Last couple of weeks, we talked to the development director for the Mighty Oaks Foundation and talked about really what that means and why that's important and how all of that works. And it's always fascinating to me to hear where people come from, the different things that God does in their lives to bring them to a point where they can be used where they are right now. And this is so important for us to understand, of course. We've talked about that. And today is a show similar to that. Today we have Michael Hanson. Michael is the COO, Chief Operating Officer, Operations Officer for the Mighty Oaks Foundation. And Michael, you've been with us for almost 6 months.
Yes.
Right at 6 months.
Yep.
Yeah.
Flying by fast.
Flying by fast. This year's been crazy. What a great year to join a new organization.
Oh yeah, I mean it's been an honor. It's you say 6 months, but it feels like one.
Yeah.
Not because of COVID, but because we are very busy here, and it's been a blessing.
Yeah, and a lot of what you've done in the last 6 months really is looking over what we've done up to this point and kind of evaluating who we are and where we are and projecting how to go forward.
Yeah, I think that's the business analyst part of me. It was it's a lot of fun to be able to come in and take a look at Mighty Oaks, and I think what I've learned so far is really what a great job you guys have done so far. Now that's always a relief.
Now you don't have to say that just because you're on the show, but
no, there's always those scary skeletons that you discover when you go through this process. And those skeletons don't exist. I'm glad you get great people, great team. The programs are amazing. I even went through the programs. And to see all this come together and look at the timeline, the history of Mighty Oaks, what you, Chad, and others have done, is you can just really see the work of God in it.
Sure.
Now, that's always a nice thing. It's just fun for me to be able to come in and take a look at this and say, okay, you've come this far, done so great. God, what's next?
Right.
How can we what does 2021 look like now?
Yeah.
Let's get involved in that. Let's dig into that. And we've had many conversations about that, so we're very excited about 2021. So I've kind of gone through the process of looking at the who, what, when, where, why of Mighty Oaks, and everything. And I seriously did a lot of exploring as far as who you are before I ever got here.
Yeah.
And my heart was just captivated by what you do for our veterans, our first responders, and so forth. And I thought, wow, these guys got big hearts and probably a lot of energy in order to get that done. And
we're getting older, so the energy is waning, perhaps.
And they got to be prayer warriors for sure.
Yeah.
And so it's just been an honor.
Yeah, this has been an interesting year for everyone, but for the Mighty Oaks Foundation, for those that have followed along, that have listened to us talk about our history and where we came from, really just starting, and we've told that story many times, but just trying to get going and help as many people as possible. And we've come to a point in the last couple of years where we have realized if we're going to continue to grow in a way that is meaningful, and in a way that is helpful, in a way that allows us to reach more people, then some things are going to have to change. And as we're getting into this conversation, we'll talk about a lot of things, but it's important for people that are listening to understand that this isn't just a conversation about kind of the behind the scenes of Mighty Oaks. It's understanding that whether it's in life or in business, wherever it is, you can't continue to go forward by only doing the thing that you've always done.
Right, absolutely.
And that's where we've had to come to as an organization. And again, we introduced folks to Kevin a couple of weeks ago, and various folks that we've added to our team over the years. We had to make a decision that in order for us to continue to do what we believe God has called us to do, then we have to add some people to the team that bring a level of expertise with them so that can happen. But like you said, that man, particularly for me, who's been administratively running the organization for so long, asking someone like you to come makes me feel almost like, I think I described it to you like I'm going to open all the doors on my desk, and you're going to look in and find whatever's in there, and hopefully it's okay. That's where the skeletons are kept, and it's never been intentional, but we've just kind of done our best with baling wire and duct tape to keep things moving. And it is a little nerve-wracking to have someone like you come and see what we've done and figure out what's been right, what hasn't been, and how to move forward.
Well, even in my own life, the old saying, never be the smartest person in the room. You got to surround yourself around people who,
I've never been the smartest person in the room. So.
No, and we never should be, and we should always be aligned with people who are our mentors, who are our leaders, who can teach us new things, so that we don't get in that rut that you're talking about. And it's easy to stay where you are; it's comfortable. We all know that.
Right.
We can stay there for 10 years.
Yeah.
Mighty Oaks could stay there for 10 years. But let's not, because of its mission, its purpose is so needed, so heavy, that, when I started looking into just the programs, the effectiveness of the programs, honestly, I'm thinking, how does Mighty Oaks do this well in a short period of time? That I was a little skeptical. That was probably the one thing I was a little skeptical to. And so I did actually go to a program. I spent 6 days there. So I was able to witness exactly what Mighty Oaks and all the leaders do. And man, it brought me to tears. It was amazing. It was so amazing to watch these men. It was a men's group, the Legacy program, and to watch them come in so cold. I'm not going to say hi to me or anything. And I thought, man, how are they going to change this in 5 days? Because I've grown up also in the corporate world and with some mega churches as executive pastor. And it is a real challenge to get someone from a lost, hurt state into a relationship with God. Yeah. That can take weeks, and Mighty Oaks is telling me they can do this in 5 days. It can take years.
It can take a long time. Yeah.
But come about day 4 in the program, some of these guys who just told me that they're done. They were just done. They're going to leave their families. Their kids don't like them. They're just over. And I'm thinking, man, this is hopeless. Yeah. And I'm thinking, good luck, Jeremy. And
good luck, team. From Mighty Oaks. Yes.
Yes. But to go through that process with the guys, the leaders and everybody, I was just so impressed. That by the 4th day, these same men who just given up on life, have no hope, were saying, man, I wish we could stay here longer.
Yeah.
And so I'd ask, why? Why do you want to stay here longer? I really want to know. And they gave the greatest answers, and they really wanted to as much as they were giving up on their families, they really wanted to hold on to their families, but they just didn't know how. And as I watched each of the leaders teach a session, it was so relevant in today's time, the situations that these men were going through, that you did not want to miss a session.
Right.
There was nobody late to a session. They're all watching what was going on. And over that slow period of time, the way that we met in our groups, we met together, we had one-on-one time, we had some recreation. They had a great week. It was a great week.
Yeah.
And by the last day, it was hard to say goodbye to everybody. So the funny thing is when I left, my wife picked me up and she goes, "Well, so tell me all about it." And I'm like, you know what? I just need to sit back in this car seat for just 20 minutes and just close my eyes and decompress a little bit, because I was just that overwhelmed of the greatness of what happened there. And to watch them bring faith into the program in such a non-threatening, casual, but in-your-face way was life-changing for me.
Yeah.
So it was quite amazing.
Yeah.
I've learned a lot.
Yeah.
I had this plan that I only had to make it to take care of my kids because I was done with this world. I had another excuse that I had adopted in my life. Even as a Christian, I'd heard that, if you commit suicide, you can't go to heaven. Well, I heard that wasn't true. So I already put this expiration date out there that I just had to take care of my last kid, which is my youngest daughter, Kayla. And so my plan was, I just had to fight hard enough, long enough to get past that time. And then it would all be okay to check out. I hadn't told anybody that. I hadn't shared that with any therapists. I was keeping that private because as soon as you tell somebody, they do something, right? And they stop you.
Right.
And, but I had this friend, Clint, who noticed it. And I know a few other people noticed it as well. So I don't know if they were in cahoots together, but one day he said, "Hey, I heard about this thing called Mighty Oaks, and it's down in California, and I think we should go to it." And I says, "Yeah, you go ahead, buddy. That's right up your alley." And no offense to California, but from we don't like anybody. I was like, "Yeah, it's not even Montana, so you go ahead." He's like, "No, I really want you to go." I'm like, "Dude, I don't want to go. I don't want another veteran program. I'm good. You know."
Right.
Just whatever I need to help you and support. She goes, "Oh, cool. Would you, I don't want to be down there by myself and not know anybody." So he kind of pulled the buddy card and he said, "Would you go with me?"
Right.
I'm like, "God, I really don't want to." He says, "Man, I really need it." That's what he said. I'm like, "Okay, buddy, I'll go with you." Brandon at that time was handling all that stuff. And I remember him sending out his emails, and he could probably see the no reply coming back. And so he contacted Clint. Luckily, Brandon didn't quit. So I owe him a lot. He contacted Clint. Clint got the paperwork and, urged me to give him the paperwork so we could send that in. And we signed up for Mighty Oaks. A few weeks later, or I don't remember if it was even months later, I was watching this date come up on my calendar, and I was really hoping that Clint would have changed his mind, because we didn't talk back and forth. And the night before we were supposed to leave, Clint says, "All right, cool. I'll pick you up at this time. We're driving all the way to California." And so we drove down there to California, and I ended up at Mighty Oaks on time, literally on time, that we were supposed to start, which I think is at that time was 4:30 or 5. I don't remember. And we walked straight in, sat down, and this Mighty Oaks thing was starting in front of me, playing out.
Yeah.
So while I was sitting there, I'd like to say this too. So when I got in there, I sat down. I was already against it. I was here for Clint. I was here to help him out, help my buddy out. But having been through programs like this, I knew the one thing I needed early and as fast as I could was to disqualify Mighty Oaks and their program. So from minute one, when they started getting up in front of us and welcoming us to Mighty Oaks, California, to the lodge, I was looking for fault. I was looking for reasons to discredit the guys in the program standing before me, and it didn't happen. And then we started teaching class after class after class, and I was even trying harder and harder and harder to find error in their use of scripture, because I figured I was really educated in that.
Sure.
and qualified to discredit somebody. So I was really trying real hard to do that, and I couldn't do it. So then my next go-to was, well, they don't know what I've been through. Yeah, I get the combat thing. I get the law enforcement thing. Yeah, I see how those meld together. And yeah, we've been to Iraq or we've been to Afghanistan. We've seen some very traumatic things in our lives. And I was like, but they didn't know every flavor. And come to the end of the week, honestly, they covered everything, but they didn't cover at that session, the trauma that I experienced as a child.
Right.
But by that point, when I saw the authenticity of these men, the honesty, but more so where they were and this path of healing.
Yeah.
I couldn't deny that, and that came to fruition by Heather's testimony. That we have a testimony there that really removed a lot of lies in my life, and then I started listening rather than fighting against the process.
Yeah. And Heather, she gives her testimony. She was a military spouse, and her husband ended his life, and she talks about, we say the other side of that, but what that looks like and how that unfolds. But yeah, powerful testimony. Yeah,
it's the one that pulled me out of my seat and kind of slapped me around a little bit and said, dude, there might be something to this.
Yeah.
Let's listen to these guys. And let's, as we say there, let's try something different.
Right. Let's try something different. So you've done this now for a long time. You talked literally to hundreds of guys, I would imagine. You've heard probably just about every story and every situation I can imagine that there is. And it is interesting because a lot of the folks who visit say, well, this is all about the military thing or the combat thing. Some people even disqualify themselves. They'll say, well, I served in the military, but I didn't do combat. I think you would acknowledge this as well. The majority of the people that attend our program, although they may have been in combat, that's really not what they're dealing with. Some of them are, but very few. Really, they're dealing with, like you, childhood trauma, relationship issues, identity issues, a lot of other stuff, and also service in the military or also combat service. So having talked to hundreds of people, dealt with hundreds of situations, you probably can't boil it all down to one thing. But if someone was sitting in front of you and said, I just need hope, I'm just broken, I need hope because of what happened in my past, because of what happened since then, because of the loss of friends, because of the loss of a relationship, where do I find hope? If you don't give it to me, if you don't tell me what to look for, I'm walking away. What do you say to them?
Well, I start very early off in the week by just asking the same question I asked myself. If I was to ask you, for me to live is what? How would you answer it? And not only as just someone that's trying to help them figure that out. I mean, I know the answer. I know what it is, but I'm waiting for them to first of all acknowledge the question, acknowledge that any answer they've tried to put in there has not worked. If they do know the answer, but have walked away from it, I shouldn't say walked away, either they became weak, unruly, or faint-hearted in that walk. I remind them that at the end, I ask if I can help them answer that question as we go through this week.
That's good.
And it comes down to, for me to live is Christ.
Yeah.
Some of the famous words by Paul.
Yeah.
In the scripture that we use, right? And I have this simplicity deal that I talk to these guys. Faith is not difficult. It is not difficult to maneuver. It is not difficult to use. It is not difficult to find the answers in life. It doesn't require a special version. It doesn't require the whatever, the perfect pastor. But in God's word, with a perfect Father, we do find where he gives us that answer. For me to live is Christ. And that's the phase we're in right now. It does go on to say, but to die is gain. But for right now, we're to live. And then I slowly keep adding there that for me to live is Christ. This Christ that we speak of says, for me to live, or goes on to say in his own words, he says that I am come to give you life and that you may have it more abundantly.
That's right.
and that's hope.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's, I guess, a Rosenbaum short answer, which wasn't so short, was it?
It's a great answer. And I think that's what hope is. It's where am I putting my focus? Where am I putting my attention? What am I looking at? And the reason people are hopeless is because they're looking inside of their own circle for a reason. And all those reasons fail them. And it's not until they elevate their view and look outside of their circle and understand there is one who is eternal, who's all powerful, who's never left them, who loves them, who's demonstrated it, and who gives, life more abundantly. That is the only place to find hope. And that's tremendous, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, and I just help them seek that way. And it's just a pointing and a sharing with them process. The journey is theirs. You can't force them on it. You can't drag them on it. We can't force what we teach at Mighty Oaks on them. But we got to teach them that vertical discipline first.
That's great.
And then we start working on the other aspects of the relationships in life, the horizontal disciplines they need to work on as well.
That's awesome. Man, that's awesome. We need to have this conversation again because I think there's a lot more to say there, but that's fantastic, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for sharing. I know it's not easy. I was talking today with someone and they were asking why we tend to use story and testimony and those things. And you can tell somebody something all day long. You can give information, but until you connect it personally and make it real, it just lacks impact. And so I really appreciate you doing that and sharing and for all the work that you continue to do, man. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
For sure. For those of you who are listening, thank you for listening. And if you're listening and not watching, jump over to YouTube and you can find us there. Look for Mighty Oaks Foundation. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Tons of content there we'd love to share with you. And if you know someone that could be helped, we serve veterans, active duty service members, the first responder community, spouses of those. We would love to help. Please reach out to us through our website, mightyoaksprograms.org, and we'd love to connect with you there. Thank you, and we will talk to you next time.